Hello and welcome to Fantasy View, a podcast about reviews for fantasy novels. I'm Jason Hubbard. You know, if you had told me a year ago that I would really like a book about fairies, I would have suggested that you change your medication, because clearly your current meds are doing nothing for you. But lo and behold, I took a chance with a book called Fairy Metal Thunder by J.L. Bryan. And instead of being a big old cheese fest, the story ended up having a lot of heart, some amusing moments, and a genuinely compelling dilemma. I'm sorry, all you authors out there who do fairy stories. I guess I misjudged you. I guess not all of you want to write stories suitable for Tinkerbell. Fairy Metal Thunder is about a garage band in Chippewa Falls, Wisconsin. Their singer-songwriter Aaron is very talented, and that's all the band has going for it. The book makes it clear that the band has passion, but needs more practice if they're ever going to rock Madison Square Garden. But the band gets a shot of adrenaline when the guitarist, Jason, winds up in the world of the Fae, and he takes it upon himself to nab the musical instruments from a fairy band who carelessly took their eyes away from them. Jason may have been an ass for doing that, sure, but I can't fault him too much for it because he's a generally well-behaved kid who just wants to make music people love. The instruments started out as traditional ones, but they transform into instruments of rock, and soon the band is making music that has a hypnotic effect on people. They make some YouTube videos, and suddenly people just can't get enough of them, forming huge crowds in places that weren't designed to handle them. So, yes, it's like that Gems and the Hologram movie that I totally didn't see, I just heard about it. But with fairy magic. So, it's more like the Gem cartoon and not the movie. As if I care. I just finished the sequel called Fairy Blues, which is about the band signing a major record deal. Sounds boring, I know, but the thing is that the stolen instruments have caused quite a stir in the fairy world. Queen Mob is furious upon learning that the instruments were stolen by a human, because according to her supreme law, nothing from the fairy world is allowed to cross over into the human world. Humans have forgotten that fairies exist, and Queen Mob and her ilk want to keep it that way. The fairy band who had their instruments stolen are told by the queen that they must find a way to get their instruments back, and they must pay for any expenses from their own pockets. They do so, and soon they have debt collectors coming after them, and they have to get normal jobs. And they can't afford new instruments, so that's simply not an option. I actually felt bad for this fairy band, which also consists of an ogre and a faun, because they didn't ask to get robbed, yet they're paying through the nose for their bit of carelessness. And yet, at the same time, I'm hoping Jason and his band will make it big with their fairy instruments, just as they always wanted. I mean, hell, who doesn't want to go from rags to riches without using an auto-tuner to make you sound good? Just a bunch of magic instruments. I'm not even sure if that sounds logical. I just hate the thought of big-name artists using auto-tuners. I forgot to mention this in my review of Fairy Metal Thunder, but the author has some good satire in this story. You know how when you play Grand Theft Auto, you see logos and brand names in billboards and in radio commercials? And they seem similar to real-life brand names? Well, J.L. Bryan does the same thing, only he gets a little more creative. There's a coffee house brand called literally Local Coffee Shop, which is some entrepreneur's idea of suitable Starbucks competition, and it sets up the fake atmosphere of a log cabin. It's a bit of wilderness in the big city, but you feel less like a real lumberjack and more like a poser. There's also satire concerning the music industry. A few real names get dropped here and there, like Jay-Z and Britney Spears, but there are also some fictional names like DJ Smooth Move, who makes awful rap songs and acts like a rebel in his music videos. I liked how the band had an interesting choice in who to sign with. They first meet with a famous but fictional music manager who seems genuinely concerned with making great music. He invites the band to an audition, even though he just saw them in concert and they have millions of hits and likes on their YouTube videos. Some may call him clueless, but to me he just seems practical. And then there's the huge, big, mega conglomerate called the Malarkey Group, which has a family of media outlets designed to expose movies and songs to as many people as possible. The band members each get contracts about as thick as magazines, which, as anyone can tell you, is never a good sign. Once the band gets their album deal, they're put to work almost right away. Only they don't make songs that Aaron the songwriter made, but pre-arranged songs that are simple and clean for radio. This made me think about how the music industry works, where creativity and individualism can be stifled. Just ask Cypress Hill. And yet, this concept of the band making only clean songs isn't very relevant nowadays. A lot of today's top 40 hits are actually edgy and depraved, with cuss words and sexual innuendo. There's one song where the singer claims that he likes having sex like a gorilla. This part of the story is more reminiscent of the late 90s, with supergroups like the Spice Girls and the Backstreet Boys. Those groups were so clean, you could eat a fine T-bone steak right off their asses. Even when NSYNC tried to be edgy with their album No Strings Attached, they just sounded like 5-year-olds putting on big boy pants. The story would be more relevant today if the band was forced to make songs so borderline degenerate that they felt uncomfortable playing them. But then again, this is essentially a kid's book, so I guess the author made the right call. Speaking of kids' books, Fairy Blues does read like one, with a simple, straightforward narrative style. I prefer novels that try to be a little poetic with their descriptions, but the author here doesn't bother with that, going instead with social satire to display his creativity. Harry Potter is exactly the same way, as are a lot of kids' books, I'm sure. It makes for an easy, fast-paced read that most any reader can appreciate every now and then. As with the first installment, I could easily imagine the story being played out as a CGI movie, especially one with the creativity of Pixar. With the fast-paced, dialogue-driven story and colorful imagery, this epic saga will make for a good CGI movie series, or at least a TV series. And just like with all the best CGI movies, there are some situations that may be beyond a child's understanding, such as legal issues. But they are things that a child should learn sooner rather than later. With that said, there's one character that may make kids drop a load of bricks should they ever see her on screen. She's called the Dullahan, and she's some kind of eldritch horror who can ride in a carriage made of bones. Her head is actually separate from her body. She keeps it in a cage at arm's length, and she prefers it that way rather than leave it resting between her shoulders. She's pretty awesome with how horrifying she is, but she may leave some kids with night terrors. Aw, poor things. Maybe they should watch Hellraiser instead. For the romantics out there, there's a recurring plot thread involving Jason trying to get with Aaron. Aaron knows how he feels about her, but she already has a boyfriend and she wants to stay loyal to him. Although this may be commendable, her boyfriend is a total man bro who didn't give two shits about the band until the band hit it big. I find myself very interested in seeing how that goes. So, that's it. Fairy Blues and the previous installment, Fairy Metal Thunder, are two books about fairies that I can get behind. They have a lot of heart, some interesting action, and the author promises that the third installment will be even wilder. There are 6 installments, by the way, and all of them are available now. I have several other fairy books in this digital box set of mine, and maybe someday I'll get to them. But for my next episode, I think I'll tackle the second installment of another series. I don't know, maybe you've heard of it. It's about a boy wizard or something. Till then, thanks for listening, and please, keep reading.